So, hello! I just finished reading Arlong Park, and I want to talk about it. We don't need to say loguetown. Oh, we know over here. I am reading the series in Korean. I'm reading the Korean edition. If I, get any names wrong, that's why. One thing I do like about One Piece, in general, is that because so many of these characters are so ridiculously, absurdly physically strong. This series also focuses a lot on concepts or ideas or unconventional things that can even be even stronger than just sheer physical strength. And oftentimes our villain or our main antagonist of the arc is someone who either has thrown that away or disregarded it for the sake of physical strength or favors physical strength more. Zoro's kind of like a walking steel wall of devotion and determination and sheer force of will. I'm already making this immediately about Zoro. Obviously, it's not like Zoro never gets hurt. Zoro gets hurt all the time. Zoro gets hurt an absurd amount of times. But because his devotion to his promises and his determination is so strong, that is what makes him invincible. He's stronger for the things that he has, which he has a great line about that later, but I don't want to get ahead of myself because I'm going to start talking about Zoro again. Syrup is the strength of dedication, you could say. Like I said last time, the Baritie is the strength of conviction. And then for Arlong Park, this time I think it's the strength of words, or sort of the weight words carry, which is shown in a lot of different ways here. We'll just, because I don't want to forget anything, so I think I'll just flip through the pages and see what I have to say about them when I look at them. Yeah, so then we see Arlong. I knew that Arlong was a guy that existed, but I didn't really know what he looked like, and I didn't really know what his personality was. But I have to say, I'm not a villain person where I really enjoy villains, but I do like kind of the atmosphere that comes from a villain who is about having fun, but no one is actually having fun, but it makes for such a tense kind of atmosphere. You have to rise to that energy despite how terrifying the situation is. You have to match that energy of the villain who's having fun. You have to have fun along with him, and if you don't, it's an instant death. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I like that kind of atmosphere. I knew that Nami had a thing. I thought that Arlong was just blackmailing her. I didn't know she was a member of his crew. Yeah, I do like how it's immediately present, the masks that she's putting on. I think the fact that you see her change so much adds to kind of the tension and gives you a bigger idea of what her situation is like, that she needs to control her demeanor so much at all times. So with what I said about Arlong kind of being the strength in words, anytime Arlong talks about Belmer to Nami, he always says that she killed her parents. Yeah, I don't know what he says in English, but in Korean, anytime Arlong talks about Belmer and that Nami killed her, he says bumo, which is your parent. He doesn't say you killed your foster mom. He doesn't say you killed that woman. He doesn't even say you killed her and says her name. He says you killed your mom. You killed your parent. And to me, that means that she, that's her winning. The thing that she did to sacrifice herself at that time and go down saying that she was their mother, that carried over. That's so strong that Arlong is still calling her mom to this day, which I think is kind of her winning there. That overpowers it, because she knew that the weight of calling herself that, and she didn't want to just give that up. And also how the townspeople know that even just letting Nami know that they know what she's doing, they've known the whole time, they believe in her, just saying that to her would be enough to drag her back and keep her here instead of having her go off and do whatever. They wanted to let her leave and try to go have a life and not care about them, because they knew that just saying that would be enough to bring her here. When Zoro's fighting Haji, he has that line where he's like, my 3 swords are heavier than yours, any of your 8 could ever be, because of the thing attached to them and the weight that they carry. I love it. And then it shows Mihawk where he's saying my favorite line, what baggage are you carrying again? So that kind of fits more in with Zoro and his strength of devotion and promises and all that stuff. But I did really like that, because Hachi's just carrying 8 swords just to carry 8 swords because he can carry 8 swords. But Zoro has 3 swords because they mean so much to him and they carry so much of a weight. And Hachi doesn't understand it, and he's like, what? But I'm strong. You're a puny little human. I can lift a lot of stuff. Look at my 8 swords. And Zoro's like, no. Nah. Another thing with our importance on words and kind of how Arlong, because again, he's someone who touts himself as always sticking to his promises, but then he manipulated, or he found a loophole in the promise that he made to Nami just so he didn't have to follow through on it and could keep stringing her along. It's like the one thing that she's been clinging to this entire time. That promise alone, that sentence, is enough to propel her to keep going in this, because to her, if she just gets to that amount, then everything will be fine. And then Arlong is the one who kind of twists that, makes a mockery of the thing that he promised. I love all the ways that all of the crew show up for Nami, kind of, and how immediate, like instantly they are to turn to her side and just run to help her out. Zoro, again, he throws himself into the water because he's like, I don't buy that. And then Usopp, that scene where she stabs him is great. He like does his whole death immediately without even thinking about it. And just all of the ways that everyone shows up for Nami immediately, instantly, without hesitation, I think is very sweet. And of course there's the one big one where they did that, but we'll get to the scene. There's definitely a big thing with Nami about feeling like a burden. The burden of them having to care about you. Because that was what the fight with Belmare was about, right? Because the hardest thing for her is asking for help. One thing I think this arc makes very apparent about Nami is how she it makes the way she interprets things and kind of reads the world and people very apparent. She exists solely for her utility to others and what she can offer them. Genjo is telling little Nami that the thing that kept Belmare from dying was looking up, like she was about to die when she looked up and she saw Nami smiling, and then she tossed any thought of that away. Little Nami, hearing that, I think she interpreted that as, oh okay, smiling is what I have to do. Like she interpreted it as something that she now had to do all the time in order to, like, this is something she can supply, instead of it just being her. Like she was just, as a baby, it was just her smiling, and just her being her was enough to get Belmare to want to live, to want to be there and take care of her. And that theme carries over with the Straw Hats too. Like, they just care about Nami as herself. That's all she needs to be. But for Nami, I think she took that as like, oh, well, I always need to keep smiling. If this is something I can do for other people, then I need to do it like this. Because like when she looks at him, she gets a little like sweat drop on her face. So she doesn't like look like relieved to hear this information. She doesn't look happy when he tells her that. So you have Nami feeling like she has to get herself to smile all the time. But then you've got Genjo, who wears a pinwheel on his hat 24/7 just because when Nami looked at it, it made her smile. So it's like, Nami, like, you don't have to force yourself to do this all 24/7, all day, every day, always be smiling, because there's someone beside you all the time who will just get you to smile anyway. Am I saying that correctly? Do you know what I'm trying to say? I feel like I know what I'm trying to say, but I can't say it. And it fits in with the thing of recognizing that there are people beside you who will help you out. You don't have to do it by yourself all the time, because sometimes there will just be a person with a pinwheel on their hat putting it there just to make you smile. You don't have to get yourself to smile just by yourself. There will be other people who are willing to help you get there as well. I just don't know how to phrase it correctly, but like, do you know what I mean? And then of course, the Nami picture after we learn that information is her like panting and smiling. I see you. You aren't subtle. I see you. Is it good to focus on that? Are you gonna focus on him? On her? You aren't subtle. I see you. I didn't need that. I think that's what I'm trying to say. If smiling can relieve people of burdens, she will keep smiling at all times, because she does not want to burden anyone with anything. I think Nami has, again, what she like grossly misinterprets things, but it's because of the way that she kind of, her view on other people's relation to her in general. There's a lot of her taking things people say and just woefully misinterpreting them. She takes this thing of Belmare saying that as long as you keep surviving, good things are bound to happen, as a reason for, okay, well then I can just do everything by myself. I don't have to involve anyone else. If all I have to do is keep living, I'll just do that and then it'll be okay. And I don't need to get anyone else involved. I don't need to ask anyone else for help. I can just keep living and good things will happen. And it's like, girl, It's not what she meant. Yeah, so again, if smiling can relieve people of burdens, she'll keep doing that, and she'll just do everything by herself and won't have to involve anyone else in anything. After Nami learns that they've known the whole time, she's like yelling at Arlong, she's about to cry, but when she gets to the town and she stands in front of them, she's got the biggest smile on her face. She knows that they know, so she has to try to relieve them of that. Even the help me scene isn't really enough for her mindset to shift. It happens, there's one scene where you can see it finally kind of clicks for her, and that's later. But even after Genjo hugs her and tells her that she's done so well, but you know, she doesn't have to do this anymore, they'll fight for her, she looks terrified. It's a lovely scene, but it still doesn't get to her fully. I mean, it's also because they're going into fight, but I think that she's still, like, that still wasn't enough to relieve her of feeling like a burden to them. Even though she asks for help, and again, there's our thing with the weight of words and the importance of her physically saying, help me, because that's what Luffy was waiting for. He stands there waiting for her, because he knows the importance of Nami saying it for herself. But even though she does, it still doesn't relieve her of feeling like she's being a burden, especially with how much she's crying. I think it's also she feels awful having to say it. It's halfway there, but the part of her with her utility and feeling like a burden is still not resolved, and that gets resolved later, which I really, really like. It's this one thing that she says isn't like a fix-all. She still has a lot of distorted ways of viewing things in her perceptions. Oh yeah, and then like they're all already waiting, you know, again, like everyone's rallying for Nami. They're all already standing there. He was just waiting for her to say it. Like all she had to do was say it. They're all waiting to go immediately and go help her right away. It's lovely. The really nice part about that scene where they're like, those guys made Nami cry, is because then they specifically say like, those guys made Nami cry. What other reason do you need? Like, she's so worried about people feeling burdened about these things they know about her, I guess, and kind of just that making them feel like they have to help her and get involved in things. But everyone wants to help her without knowing any of that. They don't know what's going on. They don't need to, though, because they want to fight and help anyway. Oh yeah, and this whole thing with Luffy getting his feet in the ground and throwing in the water. I do like the ways that Luffy can be incapacitated, I think are interesting to see, and have them try to work around that, work through battles without just, you know, setting Luffy loose, right? It makes for more interesting stuff. Have people come in exactly when they need to, so it's not just right out the gate. Everyone shows up at the same time, but you still find ways to make the battle kind of draw out, but not like draw out like in a negative way, like it's dragging on too long, but pace it correctly, finding ways to pace it correctly. Like it feels like people are involved and not just like sitting around. You find ways to get everyone involved, but have reasons as to why they can't just go swing in full swing right from the start, while not feeling like it's dragged out and not feeling like these people are just sitting around and not doing anything when they should be. Oh, yes! Okay, I get to talk about it. Usopp is such a good moment. Crazy physical strength fights are cool, but also when you have a character like Usopp who's just like a guy, it makes it so interesting because you look at the situation he's in and he's like, okay, how are you gonna get yourself out of that? So it makes it fun to see how that plays out. And just the moment around this is great. I think the thing with a lot of Usopp's lies is that they are so outrageous. They're so out there, or just something that he feels is so far away from anything he could actually do, right? That it makes them very easy to tell. But then here, he's sitting there, he's got like ketchup on him, and he's trying to be like, oh, well, maybe I could like put some dirt on me so I at least look like I put up a fight. There, it's like that kind of lie, the one where he's sitting there and he's realizing that like he could fight if he wanted to. It's a possibility now, it's not just something crazy far off. Like, he can sit here and make the decision to fight. He doesn't want to walk away knowing that he could fight and he would choose not to and go lie about it. Like, that's the kind, he can't sit with that. And it also has him realizing and just thinking about what everyone else is doing and knowing that if everyone else can fight, surely he can too. At least something. He can find it in himself to do. Definitely could have done something and you did nothing and then lied about it. I think he realizes that he doesn't want to sit with that. He doesn't want to be that. Oh, it's so good. Such a great moment. I do think because he's so much of just like a guy. I really feel like Usopp is kind of like the rationale, which is funny because he's such a scaredy cat, but kind of the center. He keeps them kind of grounded. He's the one person who can't afford to be going off and doing all this wild stuff like Zoro or Luffy can, right? And I know Nami's like she's not like a big fighter or anything, but she still has this whole thing that she's been tangled up in her whole life. Usopp is just a guy in a town. That's it. It's not a bad thing that he's just a guy. Everyone needs just, you know, the guy to keep them kind of grounded in, I guess, realism, which is saying a lot for One Piece, but you know. Oh! And back to our theme of the weight of words. Because he in that moment, he feels the weight of his lie for, I think, one of the first times. It has kind of the weight and reality to it that the other ones don't, because they're just so ludicrous. Oh yeah, and then when Arlong is like, so Nami, are you my crew or are you theirs? She doesn't say either of those options. She can't get herself to say either of those. I think they both feel too final to her. So instead she says kind of a middle thing where it's like, let's die together, because it's still like in her support of them, but also implying that Arlong is going to beat them and they are going to lose. And then there's this moment where I didn't really know what was going on. After she runs it with everyone, Zoro looks over her and he gives her a thumbs down. I don't really know why he did that. I think there are multiple ways to interpret it. The one I've come up with that I like is that he is so hurt and disoriented that he's trying to give her a thumbs up, but messes it up and gives her a thumbs down. But despite that, he's still gonna go get up and fight anyway. I'm sure there are other ways to look at it. Just because Nami looks like she looks kind of confused. He's trying to give her a thumbs up, but is so disoriented that he ends up giving her a thumbs down because he can't tell that he's pointing his thumb down. Especially because he was grabbing his head before, so like he's really... Oh my god, what was that? That's what I like to think of it as. So this is one of my favorite moments, or kind of just like series of moments. It fills up the other half of Nami's whole perception that's kind of still negative. When Luffy is yelling about how he needs help from people because he has so many of these things that he can't do, so that's what he relies on others for. And for Luffy, I think it's in a good way. I need help from people because I can't do everything myself. But Nami, when you look at Nami's face, when he says like, I need a navigator, I need a chef, I need a swordsman, when you look at her face, she's not like happy when he says that. She doesn't look really particularly like relieved to hear him say that. The thing that makes her smile and look more comfortable is when Arlong says, you're useless and you're making such a big mess for all of your crew, and yet here they are and they're still coming to save you anyway. And that is what makes Nami smile, because that's still what she thinks this is. Luffy saying that, I think for her, was still her viewing it the way Arlong views her, in that he needs her specifically just for her position and the utility she can offer to his crew. But then when he says like, oh, you're making such a mess for everything, but people are coming to help you anyway, she's like, yeah, they are. I'm messing everything up and everything's a mess, but they're still coming anyway, so take that. So she's still seeing it as like she is causing a big mess for everyone and she's messing things up that way. But then what finally gets her to realize that that's not how Luffy sees it, it's different than Arlong, is when he gets to the room that she's been like slaving her life away in and he destroys all of it completely, and like her work, because he doesn't need her for her skills at navigation. He wants her on her crew because it's her, even though he does like need her help. It's not that he has her solely for the help she can give to him. So I think that is when she finally realizes that. She fully kind of understands the view that the others have of the situation rather than the one that she's been operating under. I really like that whole thing. To go back to our theme again, I think when Nami was leaving, I think she knew that if she had to physically stop and say goodbye, that she probably wouldn't be able to leave. Or maybe probably a little bit still. She doesn't want them to feel burdened by like a teary goodbye. So she lets them be mad at her instead. And then again, that pinwheel where he puts it beside the grave so they're watching out over her. And then you know what? That spot on the hill where the grave is kind of overlooks the ocean. So if she comes back that way, she's gonna see the pinwheel spinning in the wind. And it'll make her smile. It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, I I literally look like a ghost. I look so pale. I've just crawled out of my grave to go talk about One Piece. So this is me now, having read from Loguetown to Whiskey Peak. The chapter I stopped in the chapter where Nami and Usopp on the boat in Little Garden with the thing that's like this behind them. That's the last thing I've seen. So that's as far as we've read, and now I'm talking about Loguetown. This section, not Loguetown. Yeah, I would say this section is probably my least favorite of everything I've read so far. But I mean, we've just come after like the Bartier and Arlong Park, so understandable. And also they serve different purposes. I think I'm naturally less interested just because it's not as character heavy as the main like introductions to everything were. I'm still enjoying myself, obviously. Okay, so Loguetown. I wish we were here longer, but I also feel like the arc like said everything that it needed to do. It was more of a setup for all of these pieces later. I really love the setting. I love how bustling it is. Like, this is the first time we're in kind of a bustling city like that. All these background characters, they aren't just like stock background characters, like especially in like the execution scene. All these people are standing and they all have such different, they're all drawn so differently, they all have their own different styles and body shapes and all that. It's really cool to look at. Okay, I need to talk about that first. The gasp that came out of my mouth when I saw that Mihawk and Shanks know each other. Oh my god, unparalleled. The visceral shock. I feel like I need to stop being surprised that everyone knows each other, because all these adult characters, they all know each other, they all have stuff going on, and no one will tell me anything. And I mean, if everyone already knows everything about everyone, you can let me in too, right? You know, I feel like that's reasonable. They all know each other, they're all intertwined, and I feel like the main kind of tether that's connecting all of them is Roger. Like, the older generation is the remnants of the things that Roger kind of left behind in his wake, and we're finding the pieces of all of these, the people that have been affected by him, and we're seeing more and more of the pieces of it. The other time I gasped, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the other time there were 3 gasps in this section. The first one was Mihawk and Shanks, and the second one was when Crocus said that he knew Roger. It's kind of like, well, Roger is Luffy. It's not subtle about that. Roger is Luffy. In the same way that Smoker is Zoro, Roger is Luffy. It's similar in the way where Luffy is traveling the seas and finding himself intertwined with all of these people, and without him they wouldn't really have any connection with each other. So he is the connecting thing, connecting all of these people to each, and eventually all the people he will come to meet, they'll all be connected by him, and their connection will be from him and the ways that they've been affected by him. And I think we're seeing what happens after that's been cut with Roger. As Luffy is building his connection throughout the world and meeting all of these people and tying them together through their affiliation with him, we're seeing the remnants of what that was with Roger. As Luffy grows his, we're learning and seeing more of how the other one ended. So we're seeing the start and we're seeing the end. Like Loguetown. The town of beginnings and endings, right? I'm putting my hat on a little bit, okay? So many people, I feel like more people than we think know Roger. Okay, if we know that the 2 people that are confirmed to have definite connections to Roger, Crocus and Diamond Face. Well, not, I don't know. He definitely does, okay? He absolutely does. Crocus and Diamond Face both have reasonings to push the younger characters forward and want to see them succeed. He didn't get in the way of them and wanted to see them continue on. Crocus did a similar thing. And you know who else did the same thing? Shanks and Mihawk. That sounds kind of like Shanks and Mihawk, doesn't it? That sounds kind of like Shanks and Mihawk. And Shanks and Mihawk know each other. Somehow. I'm putting my hat on. I feel like Shanks and Mihawk were part of Roger's crew. Because they have the same kind of vibe that the other people have of pushing the kids forward into the world of wanting to see them succeed. And then that would mean that little Luffy was like a little Roger for Shanks that he wanted to like help cultivate. They look kind of similar. And I know that doesn't necessarily mean relation. Like, I don't think Smoker and Zoro are related at all. Those 2 look alike because God demanded the parallels be made. God said, you need to be a parallel for someone in like 50 years. So you're gonna look like this. God demanded it be so. Even if they aren't related, obviously, Luffy is meant to be Roger in many different ways. If he's Roger to Shanks, who knew Roger and could have been on his crew and like dealt with the fallout of that, and then seeing a kid who looks like very similar to him for parallel reasons or other reasons, I don't know. I don't think the timeline matches up, because Smoker said that he died 22 years ago and Luffy is not 22. Shanks seeing a little Roger, I'm just saying, because like it matches. Shanks and Mihawk know each other. When did they know each other? They've known each other for a while. If they met up again after Shanks went to Luffy's town, like, he wouldn't just meet him and start, like, talking about this kid he met to, like, some random guy he didn't know, right? So they had to have met before that. They knew each other before that. Shanks went to Luffy's town and then left again, met back up with Mihawk and pulled a Maze Hughes on him, and then then they like keep meeting after that. I'm putting on my hat, my tinfoil straw hat, and saying that I think Shanks and Mihawk were part of Roger's crew. Mihawk doesn't seem like the guy to really like strike up a relationship with someone he just kind of meets in the ocean. So I feel like that would be something that happens kind of begrudgingly and just because they're in proximity with each other, like on a crew together. I've said that I think Mihawk has a person in a similar way that Zoro has a person that he feels like an obligation towards and is carrying on in some way, and who better to have? It would be awfully convenient if that person was Roger. I'm just saying, because that fits. It also would mean that instead of, I mean, I thought this kind of anyway, but instead of Zoro's journey kind of starting with the death, Mihawk's was kind of interrupted by it, which would make sense given the way I think he feels about it in comparison to how Zoro feels about it. Crocus, I think, maybe met Roger as one of the people coming in, and maybe they had like a conversation, like a life-changing conversation or something, I don't know. So Loguetown, we get like I like calling him Bizarro, like Bizarro Zoro, Bizarro and AU Karina. Which was interesting. I wasn't sure like what kind of Bizarro was meant to kind of represent, like if Roger and Smoker are Luffy and Zoro. So it's either this is a Zoro who never met Luffy and kind of stayed with the hunter and joined the Marines, or it's one who did still meet Luffy, but the relationship turned kind of distorted along the way. I'm still trying to get a sense of what Smoker is trying to represent in terms of what he means with Zoro. I think it'll be, I mean, we're going to see them again. They're saying that they're going to the Grand Line. I really want to see them again. I think it'll be mainly illustrated in the relationship between Smoker and Tashigi in Korean. He has the same title that Zoro had before. He's called like a Sanyang-kun, I think that is the name, which is like a hunter. That like kind of leads into the a Zoro who never met Luffy kind of thing, where he kept being a hunter. Smoker's entrance also parallels Zoro's. They were shown their kind of nicer side in a very similar way. Loguetown is kind of everything coming together, including the heavens above, to come and say to Luffy, like, this is not your time yet. Like, you have more to say here. You have more to do. Dragon, I know his name now, Dragon. Dragon says, like, who am I to stop a man's start? They can see the potential there, and they're not gonna let it end there yet. Luffy was okay with dying there in the same way that Roger was, which is what Smoker sees. Beginnings and endings. He himself is proof of beginnings and endings. So, and if you take into account that whole paragraph, the whole little monologue that Roger has, that whole quote, Luffy has kind of the same thing. He's standing there and he's looking at the execution site and he's thinking, this is where the Pirate King met his end. But he didn't, because Luffy is proof of that. Those things live on throughout all of the things that they've affected, and Luffy is one of those things. Because again, it's the same a place of beginnings and endings, because yes, it was the end of the Pirate King, but it was the beginning of like everything else, because it spurred on so many other things. But I said before about we're finding the seeds of Roger. He's like, this is where the Pirate King met his end, but like it really isn't. Luffy himself is proof of that. So I think that's what makes him so okay with being up there later. It doesn't end with him. But then you have like the heavens themselves interfering and Dragon interfering and saying that like there's more from you yet. We won't interrupt you. We're gonna let you continue on and we're not gonna get in your way. We have like the whole monologue thing from Roger at the beginning of chapter 100 where he's like 절대로 멈출 수가 없는 것들이 있다. There are some things that can never ever be stopped. 계승되는 의지, which is like a carried on will. 사랑의 꿈, which is like a dream made from love. Love's dream. Love's dream is like the more accurate like direct translation, but it's like a dream born out of love. A dream made from love. 시대의 일렁임, which is 시대 is like a period of time, and 일렁 is like wavy. The waviness or unsteadiness of a single period of time. 인간이 자유의 답을 찾는 한. As humans are searching for the meaning of the definition or the answer to what freedom is, 그것들은 절대로 멈추지 않는다. Those things will never ever be stopped. This is the reason that Roger was able to laugh and smile when he died, because he knows that all of those things can never be stopped. Like, they will continue on without him. These are the things all these people are left with. And I think Smoker has kind of turned away from that. Smoker obviously knows Dragon. I love that he's like, the government is really looking for your head. Are they? Smoker, how interesting of you to say that. Are you not going to do anything about that? You're just going to comment on it? So I love that. It shows that there's definitely like a relationship there. Dragon is like, oh, come on, Smoker, what are you doing? The world is waiting for an answer. You're gonna sit here and try to stop this kid like that? Yeah, so after Loguetown, I feel like the rest of this is kind of mostly world building and setup. I like world building, obviously. I think it's cool. I'm not a person who gets really into analyzing world building. I only really care about world building if it tells me something about the character's mental state. Like, if a climate informs something about a character's mental state, then I care about it, but in terms of just like general world kind of lore information, I'm not really gonna look too deeply into it. I'm just like, alright, cool, and then I kind of move on. I will say that it is nice to see Nami being so open about the fact that she like is struggling very hard and is kind of out of her depth here, because I feel like Arlong Park kind of allowed her to open up to them in that way. I don't know if she would have been as open about the fact that she really like is out of her depth and really doesn't know a lot of this stuff if Arlong Park hadn't happened and she had kind of the revelation of the way that Luffy views her in his crew. A little bit of character progression there, so that's cool. Reverse Mountain and Laboon. The older generation runs parallel to our main crew, but slightly to the left. And I'm including Laboon in that. Laboon counts. I know he's a whale, but he's over 50 years old, so this counts, okay? He's like the crew, where he has a dream that's guiding him, but it's in a way that's turned kind of harmful to him over the years. Like, it's become something, like, holding on to the dream is painful. It's painful for him, it's hurting him, but he also can't let it go. It's showing kind of the way having dreams that you're dedicating your entire life to, in some ways, like our main cast has, and it's showing a way that can kind of lead. In terms of the crew, because everyone knows everyone, someone has to know. So I don't think this will be the end of mentioning of Laboon's crew. So either they will be alive somewhere, at least like someone will be alive somewhere, or someone will know something. Just because everyone knows everyone, and I know how connected everything is, so I think we will find out more about Laboon's crew. Luffy turns this dream that had grown kind of painful for Laboon and turns it into something like lights a new fire underneath him. So he takes the old mentality from the past and instills in him the one he and his crewmates are carrying with them. And it shows how like kind of they can be the change, they can be the difference from how things have been before. They can be the difference into what the world can become now. I like that Luffy isn't just inspiring new people in, like, for example, like in his crew, inspiring new people to find ideas of who they want to be and start pursuing that. He can also work to mend old wounds, I guess, literally in Laboon's case, but kind of mend older frayed ends of the past as well, and instill that new sense and like invigorate them in a new way. Reinvigorate them or instill them with that new spark or drive that his crew carry. He can spread that to everyone, regardless of whether they're younger or older. Yeah, again, the second spot, the gasp that came out of my mouth when he said, we talked about Roger, when Crocus mentioned that he knew Roger. Oh my god. If Crocus was on Roger's crew, and 50 years ago, he was in this place with Laboon, and Roger died 22 years ago, so he would have had to be at that place for around 30 years before Roger's death. I don't know what made Roger the king of the pirates. I don't know if it was like, if Raptil was, I don't know when they found it, if like them getting there was what made him the pirate king, or if it was kind of the end. They could have gotten all the way to Raptil, then on the way back, that's when Crocus would have like left and gone to be standing at the place. I mean, he could have also left early, like he could have also left and then the rest of them continued on after that. It would be interesting if this crew that Roger had got to the end of Raftel and then whatever was there made them decide to kind of like split up. Not in a bad way, because of the way that he seemed, like Crocus seems to be kind of reflecting on it. He's like, these are the pirates we've been waiting for. Like, if they got to the end and they got to Raptil and they realized that like they weren't the people for it, it wasn't quite their thing yet. Like, they weren't quite the people that were meant to find whatever is there. And then after that, they kind of, like, on the way back, they kind of split and moved off into the world in their own ways. If Crocus was on Roger's crew, it would make sense if he was there with them and then they got to Raptil and then on the way back, he split off and stayed at Reverse Mountain. Because this sounds like a conversation that they had, like a very introspective, reflective conversation of like looking at something and being like, if Roger and his crew got all the way to the end at Raptil and whatever was there made them reflect and realize that they weren't quite the people that were meant to find it, or they weren't quite there yet. They were there but slightly to the left, right? And they were like, well, that's interesting. We'll have to be wait and find the kids that will someday. When we find them, we guide them there. Oh, maybe, you know what? Maybe that was what made Crocus step off and stay at Reverse Mountain. Was that he wanted to find the pirates that would and be able to lead them off into the right direction. That's interesting. I wonder. The straw tinfoil pearl hat grows ever larger. I think, to combine all of my theories before we move on to Whiskey Peak, which is kind of unrelated to all of this. Hi, editing me here. So I thought a lot about my tinfoil straw hat theory. Okay, so if we say that Mihawk and Shanks were on Roger's crew, it couldn't have been at the same time as Crocus, because just the age disparity is too big. If Crocus was part of the crew that went to Raftel, and then they like dispersed after that, and then like Shanks and all them could have been in like a second generation, like they could have joined after that as teenagers. That seems the least likely to me, though, that there were two iterations of crew then. And I was thinking about why he wouldn't have said anything when he brought up Raftel, but if he and Roger had been waiting for people that are meant to be the ones that are going to go there, he would want to observe them like purely as they are without saying like, oh, here's Raftel and I've been there, by the way, because then obviously Luffy would be like, oh my god, you have? What's there? Like, what's there? And they would want to ask about it. So if he's trying to see, like, get a sense of the kind of people he's meeting, I feel like he wouldn't, you would want to observe them as plainly themselves as you can without revealing that, like, you've been over there. People associated with Roger seem to have, or just any of the adults, which I guess are all I'm saying are associated with Roger, seem to have a thing of letting people do things for themselves, do things as they're meant to, allowing them that time and that avenue to do things, like discover, like, again, who am I to disrupt a man's departure? The way he speaks
sounds so much more personal than a person he had a conversation with like one time. I mean, I know Luffy's had a lot of very important conversations, very important singular conversations with a lot of people. So if they were all around, like, and when I say they, I mean like Mihawk, Shanks, Smoker, and Dragon. Whether it was Roger's crew remains to be seen, but I think they were all influenced by Roger in some way. I like the idea of the four of them having been in like a Roger fan club when they were teenagers, and then Roger died, and they all had very different opinions about it, and then it just like fizzled out and went very poorly. If we say Crocus is the person who has the most connection to Roger at this point, I think the second one would have to be Dragon, just because he's literally shown over a paragraph of Roger speaking. Like, that has to be... They didn't just do that for no reason. So Dragon, I have no basis for this, for like at all, but he reminds me of Hero Killer Stain from BNHA. Not because I think he's a murderer or a serial killer or anything, just because I feel like he has a dedication to the bit. He has one thing, he's sticking to it, he's really dedicated. Like, he got really obsessed with Roger and got really into the ideals he pushed, that he's like taken up the mantle of like continuing that after Roger died. But in like, I don't know, like the man walks around in a giant cape. I don't literally think like the four of them had a Roger fan club, but like, we know everyone knows everyone, and it keeps being revealed more and more how much everyone knows everyone. The four of them definitely were affected by Roger heavily, and I think it speaks to kind of the themes of the story, where even if they didn't know him on like a deep personal level, they could have had one interaction with him, they could have just heard about him, that was still enough to instill such a huge sense, like this huge ideal into them that they're still pushing forward to this day. If they had this Roger fan club or whatever, then the death, they all probably took it in few very different ways. The four of them, well, except for Smoker, which is why Dragon calls him out on it, all four of them share the same kind of value of letting someone have their time. Right, Shanks giving Luffy his hat and then telling him to go be a pirate and then come find him again once he does. Mihawk telling Zoro to go get his shit together and then come and find him again once he does. And then Dragon allowing them to leave, because who is he to disrupt a person's journey like that? Who is he to disrupt the beginning of someone's adventure, their departure? And then Smoker is getting in the way of that, so then Dragon calls him out and he's like, the world is waiting for our answer. Like, they are the things left in Roger's wake, and they have a duty to kind of continue on the things that he allowed them to continue on having. That makes me think they might have known him in some way. It's just the timeline doesn't really match up because of Crocus being a croaky old man. You know what, if they got to Raftel and were like, we're not the people meant to find this, and then they left and Crocus let one in his mountain, and Roger was like, well, those weren't the people, but maybe I could find some in our local teenagers. And then he goes out and tries to find it among the next gen, and he dies. And then he dies. And so he doesn't really get to find it in them, right? They don't really get the chance to do anything too much. They're instilled with this feeling of all they've been entrusted with. Then I think that could recognize the importance of it, which would lead to them doing a similar thing to their then later generation once they meet them, and as they grow up and they meet them later. If Dragon is so into continuing on Roger's whole thing, and Smoker, who he doesn't see death as anything to smile at and is completely confused and wondering why on earth this man would smile at his own death, I feel like would see Dragon and be kind of insulted by that. He wouldn't realize like the weight and gravity of this thing is gone. Like, what are you doing? Like, this thing is gone. He's dead. And he was just laughing at it. So I feel like that would be a point of contention. Very easy point of contention there. Again, this is why Smoker left the friend group. So it could be that could be a reason for Roger to have like Gen 2 crew if he got there and was like, I'm not the person meant to find this, but I'm sure there are a million other fish in the sea. Haha. A million other people in the world, a million other fish in the sea. I'm sure if I, keep going around, maybe I'll find the ones who can. And then he died, and they were the ones left. I literally had another additional thought as I was editing my additional thought. So this is what his message when he died was him, like, if he's not able to do it in person anymore, he can have that be his last words as like a way to still call out for the people he's been looking for. Was that coherent? That's what his last message was. Because if he was trying to find like a Gen 2 or whatever and then was killed in the middle of doing it, he'd want to make sure that wouldn't end there. He makes it a big call out to now everyone in the world become the people I'm looking for. Like, it's a way for him to still find the people he's looking for even after he's dead. Okay, anyway. Again, I still think it's very funny if they all had a Roger fan club and then Smoker left the friend group and it all just went to shit. It's canon in my heart, okay? Yeah, I haven't gotten very far, but it does seem like everyone knows everyone. So I don't know how much of a stretch it is to say that all four of them know each other. So, and also, if Smoker did have kind of a disagreement with Dragon, or at least just in general, regards death as you're completely gone from the world, there's nothing to really, you can't continue on from that. That would be great, because again, he's Bizarro. He's Bizarro. So that would be kind of what makes him Bizarro. You've got Zorro, who takes Kuina's death and then immediately finds a way for him of carrying it forward. Like, he dedicates the rest of his life to having her continue on. If he achieves that goal, he achieves it for her, right? So she continues on through him. And Smoker, who could look at Roger dying and not seeing at all how he could continue on through that. So if Dragon is like, I'm continuing on Roger's will, if he's like a vigilante, that makes him even more like Hero Killer Stain, okay? So, but if he's like, I'm carrying on Roger's will, and Smoker's like, that's ridiculous. Roger's dead. You can't carry on anything. He's dead. He's gone. I don't understand why everyone is like smiling about this. He's dead. He's gone. Like, I'm mad at you now because you're making like a mockery of the fact that he's dead, and you're just doing this as an excuse or whatever. So that would be something they would clash over, but still not turn in his bounty. He doesn't like dying. He doesn't like death. Based on how they regard Roger's death, the four of them, is how they feel about passing things on to other people. This is a huge assumption I'm making, but if Mihawk feels chained by way of guilt and to Roger's death, because he views it as a little differently than Zorro. So it isn't that he's carrying on Roger's will. He was entrusted with all of this, but doesn't know what to do with it now that the person is dead, which is different than what Zorro has. Zorro can find a way to carry on Kuina through his thing and have that be uplifting through him, but I think Mihawk is weighed down by the fact that whatever he was following is gone, and in this case, I'm assuming it's Roger. He doesn't want Zorro to experience that, of being given so much, failing to repay it back, and now you're stuck with the weight of you have all this strength, but it couldn't save the person you needed to. Shanks doesn't care about losing an arm because the person is still there. This is a huge assumption. I'm just guessing of different avenues this could be taken, okay? Like, what is losing an arm in comparison to losing a person? Okay, if he was affected enough by Roger, who could have entrusted him with something and then died, Shanks he still could feel the weight of the emotion of whatever Roger had entrusted to him. Like, he felt the weight of the feeling and how tangible it felt despite the person being gone. So physical things don't really matter so much as the feeling or the will associated with them. So he understands what that did for him, and that's why I think he gives his hat to Luffy. It's trying to teach him that same kind of feeling, give that same kind of feeling to him that can carry him, because he knows he's felt how much that's carried him, so he wants to help give it to Luffy to help carry him as well through his life. I think Dragon takes it the most literally. He sees it as his mission to continue on the things. Roger dying, Dragon looks at that and is like, well, now it's my turn. And he moved forward into the world with the determination to be just like keep pushing forward the same things that Roger put out. Because if he says the world is waiting for our answer, then it's like there's no reason to not continue despite the person being dead we can still continue on anyway, and I'm gonna move forward with the world. I'm gonna move forward into the world and continue to enact this onto everyone. And Smoker finds that incredibly arrogant and a really just, why would you do that? You're not him. He's dead. He's gone. Why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? I don't understand. Death is death. If Loguetown is the town of beginnings and endings, again, there's the general, like, this whole pirate thing, and the hunt for the One Piece was obviously started by the end of Roger. But it could also be if they were there to view Roger's death, like the four of them, it could have been, again, the end of Roger, but the beginning of this kind of mentality that's guided them through the rest of their lives. I do think it's really funny if Dragon was just like super into him as like a fan. He was just a really big fan and then just like took matters into his own hands after Roger died, which is why Smoker finds him insufferable. That's my tinfoil hat theory. Let's talk about Whiskey Peak now. Okay, Whiskey Peak is definitely my least favorite of this whole thing so far, but it did get the third gasp out of me, so I'll give it that. Again, I'm mostly here for character stuff. It wasn't too much of that, and we had kind of a weird character thing, which I'll get to. I want to see more of Vivi before I say too much about her. I will say that I think Vivi has, I feel like this is common with royalty characters. She has kind of a similar thing to Nami has about people sacrificing themselves for her. She doesn't like it. I feel like most people wouldn't like that, but I think she really has an issue with people putting themselves on the line for her sake, harming themselves for her sake, or things like that. So I'm interested to see more of her and get a better impression and have more to say about her as we continue on. The third gasp that got out of me was when they revealed that the cacti are not cacti, they're graves. That was so cool. That was the best part of this whole thing. That was awesome. There's not too much going on here. We do have some nice Zoro moments, both in him just, I do love the part where he starts climbing the ladder and they're like, he's climbing the ladder, go after him. And Zoro waits till they're all climbing the ladder and then he just like flings it away. I love that. That was hilarious. Like I said last time, Zoro is someone who, he makes his feelings very open through his actions without necessarily saying a lot through his words. So you kind of see just how safe and comfortable and how much he trusts the crew, because Zoro sleeps through that entire mess with the storm and getting blown around and the snow, and he doesn't wake up at any of that. He wakes up immediately as soon as he senses that something is wrong in Whiskey Peak. That wakes him up instantly. So it kind of shows like he was knocked out. He was snoozing through all of the turmoil that his crew was going on, because, you know, they're his crew. It's never a real danger. Like, they've got it. But here he wakes up immediately. You aren't slick, Zoro. Like, he doesn't need to be ready for a fight if he's surrounded by his crew on their ship. But here, he immediately senses that something is off and he's ready to go instantly. And then we come to kind of my least favorite moment in this whole thing. I understand kind of what is trying to be said, I just don't think it was done very well. So there's the fight with Zoro and Luffy, where Luffy wakes up and he sees that the entire town has been wiped out, and he asks what happened, and they say Zoro did it, and Luffy gets really mad. I understand Luffy getting mad at seeing this, because I think it illustrates the fact that his ideals and values are very important to him, and that doesn't get shaken just because you're one of his friends. Like, that the unforgivable things are unforgivable. He will see them as such regardless of who you are. Like, he doesn't give his friends special treatment in that way. So I think it illustrates that, but also unforgivable things are unforgivable, but he's still shown to give, like, consideration to his friends simply because, like, he knows them and he knows who they are. If they really did do those things are unforgivable, but he will, like, listen to and consider the fact that they are also his friends. Luffy is literally told point blank that Usopp has just been murdered by Nami and is now at the bottom of the ocean, and he doesn't have nearly the same kind of reaction. Luffy, like, the idea of Nami killing Usopp is still unforgivable. Like, if Nami murdered Usopp, I don't think he would be forgiving her for murder. But it's like,
the idea is so unforgivable and so in contrast to what he believes about Nami that he doesn't want to believe it. Like, he can't consider it immediately because of what he knows Nami to be like. And this is information that he's being told secondhand by a person that he's spent a good amount of time with, okay? He knows Johnny. He knows Johnny more than this random person that he's asked lying on the ground. The situations are like, hey Johnny, what happened? Oh, I saw Nami murder Usopp with my own 2 eyes. And then Nami comes in and says, yeah, I murdered Usopp. He's at the bottom of the ocean. And Luffy's like, what? Why are you saying that? Nami's our friend. Why are you saying that she killed Usopp? He doesn't really have a reaction to Nami saying that Usopp's at the bottom of the ocean, but he doesn't seem fazed by it because he can tell that she still needs help and is gonna help her anyway. And then compare that to this, where he's like, hi, random person on the ground I've never met in my life before. What happens? Oh, your crewmate Zoro did this. Zoro did this? And then, so, like, the same consideration is not given. And so, even if he is mad about it, which I think he would be, he doesn't give any consideration to the fact that he knows Zoro, or even try to listen to when, like, Zoro is trying to explain what's happening. I think it's so frustrating just because Zoro tries to explain multiple times what is happening, and Luffy just doesn't listen. And if he doesn't listen then, I don't know what made him listen, like, after they were done fighting. Because, like, what explanation did you give him afterward that was different than the explanation you gave him before? That apparently was enough to change his mind the second time around. I understand that it was a misunderstanding, and a lot of people find misunderstandings irritating. I don't really mind them. It's more just, when you make a misunderstanding, it's better to have both characters be on kind of equal points of ground. It's kind of an unavoidable misunderstanding, where just the way that they see the world is so functionally different from each other that they can't help but be a misunderstanding. I think those are fine. This is just like willful ignorance, which I think makes it a little more frustrating. Again, there's really no equal ground of a misunderstanding here. It's Zoro is trying to explain himself and Luffy's just not listening. And literally, like, 3 chapters after this, you've got them talking to Miss All Sunday, and she says something, and Luffy's like, wow, she's a great person. And then she says something else, and he's like, wow, what a terrible person. And I know that that was more of, like, a joke and a gag, and it's one that One Piece does often with Luffy, but, like, if you can give that amount of consideration to someone you have literally just met, who just snuck onto your ship, why can you not give it to Zoro? Zoro, of all people. So I just thought that was a little strange. Again, I do think that Luffy would be mad, so if you can't avoid Luffy being mad, then the solution is just to, like, move him. Have him wake up in a different area and just avoid the situation entirely. Because I also get that, like, to start a fight and then end it in the same chapter would be kind of silly. But this one doesn't really get an ending either, so I think the best course of action would just be to move Luffy. So he just wakes up in a different area and that isn't what he's immediately greeted with. I don't think it's out of character for him to be upset, but it is out of character for him to not even mildly consider that Zoro might have a reasoning for what happened, or, like, give him any kind of consideration at all when he's trying to explain himself. Because Luffy has been shown to change his mind very quickly, very open to receiving new information about things. Except for this one time with Zoro. I just think it was an odd little blip in our pretty consistent characterization. And then the rest of this is mainly just set up. Oh yeah, that's another thing that happened. Miss All Sunday is here. I feel like I can't talk too much about Miss All Sunday. I know more things about her than I should. Not, like, too much. Anything I say about her will be slightly tinged by that. That's kind of all I have to say. Yeah, I feel like I can't say too much about Miss All Sunday. But she's here. Here she is. I rambled way longer about Loguetown than I thought I was going to. Again, I feel like I might think of more things to say. Thank you for watching. I still don't know how to do outros. My camera's dying. That's a great one. My camera's dying and I need to go now. Bye.